I never thought I'd be the kind of woman whose husband would walk away without a second thought, taking everything, leaving me with nothing but an empty account and a pile of unpaid bills. But that's exactly what happened. One morning, I woke up thinking we were still building a future together. By nightfall, I realized I'd been erased from the life he was planning while he ran off with someone younger, richer, and apparently less boring. I was humiliated, I was broke, and everyone expected me to stay down. But I didn't. I built something he couldn't steal, couldn't touch, and definitely couldn't believe. And the moment I saw him again at the open house for the dream home he always wanted, I smiled. Because the woman who once had nothing, she owned everything now. Before I take you through every twist and every heartbreak of this story, do me one favor. If you've ever been left behind, underestimated, or told you couldn't make it without them, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. This one's for anyone who ever had to rebuild from scratch. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how I went from being abandoned, broke, and humiliated to building an empire my ex-husband could only dream of touching. We met when I was 25, and I fell hard for him. Derek had charm, confidence, and the kind of ambition that made you believe he'd conquer the world. I was a dreamer too, but a softer kind. I loved cooking, reading, and building a cozy home. So when he suggested I quit my job to support his business dreams and focus on our future family, I agreed. I believed in him and I believed in us. For years, I supported him in every way, managing the house, cheering him on during his late nights, even lending him my inheritance to help fund his first startup. He promised he'd pay it back tenfold, that we were building a future together. But once the money came in, everything changed. Derek became colder, distant. He stopped coming home for dinner. He'd claim it was meetings and late work, but I could feel it in my bones. Something was wrong. One day, I got a text while grocery shopping. "I'm sorry, Clara. This isn't working. I need space." I dropped my basket in the middle of the store. My heart pounded. I rushed home, thinking maybe it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, but when I got there, the apartment was half empty. His clothes were gone. The safe was open. Our joint bank account cleared out. He left me nothing, not a dollar, not a message, just a silence so sharp it cut deeper than any insult ever could. I sat on the floor of our empty living room and cried until my ribs hurt. I had no income, no savings, and nowhere to turn. My so-called friends, they all sided with him. "He's just doing what's best for himself," one said. "You'll bounce back," another shrugged. But no one really cared. I was just the woman who'd given up her life for a man who discarded her like trash. That night, I decided something. I would never, ever rely on anyone like that again. And I would build something so massive, so unstoppable, that Derek would regret the day he walked out. The morning after Derek left, I woke up to an apartment that felt like a ghost town. The silence was deafening. No coffee brewing, no morning texts, just me and a heart still cracked open. But something shifted inside me. Pain has a strange way of either paralyzing you or propelling you. I chose the latter. I gathered every bill, every overdue notice, every debt statement Derek had conveniently left behind and laid them out on the table. I stared at them, not with fear, but with determination. If this was rock bottom, I was going to build from the rubble. I sold everything that wasn't essential, furniture, jewelry, even my wedding ring. I moved into a tiny studio apartment, took a waitressing job, and started freelancing online at night. My degree in design, once dismissed as a hobby by Derek, became my greatest weapon. I taught myself how to build websites, run social media campaigns, and create branding packages. I barely slept, but every dollar I earned felt like a middle finger to the man who left me with nothing. Within 6 months, I had a client list. Within a year, I had a business. And for the first time in my life, I was in control. No one could take it away from me. I still remember the day I hit my first $10,000 month. I sat at my desk, tears streaming down my face, not because of the money, but because I finally felt like me again. Not Derek's wife, not the woman he abandoned, but Clara, the woman who rose from the ashes. But I wasn't done. I kept growing. I hired a team. I launched a second business, a coaching platform to help other women rebuild their lives after betrayal. The messages I got from clients were overwhelming. You saved me. Your story gave me strength. I realized I wasn't just healing myself, I was helping others heal too. And that, more than the money, became my fuel. The first time I saw Derek again was by accident, well, at least on his part. I was speaking at a local women's entrepreneur event, something I'd never imagined myself doing just 2 years earlier. I just finished telling my story on stage, how I went from rock bottom to building a six-figure business, when I spotted him at the back of the room. He looked older, thinner. The confident arrogance he once wore like cologne had faded into something almost pitiful. And beside him stood a younger woman clinging to his arm like she needed him to breathe. I didn't break eye contact as I walked off stage and into the applause. I didn't need to. The silence between us screamed everything. Later that evening, I found out from a mutual acquaintance that Derek had lost his job during a corporate downsizing. His new wife, Mia, I think her name was, had no idea how to live without luxury, and their debt was piling up fast. I should have felt smug, but what I felt was nothing. No bitterness, no satisfaction, just a clear sense of how far I'd come and how far behind he now was. The tables hadn't just turned, I'd built a whole new game. That's when the idea hit me. I remembered the house Derek always dreamed of owning. It was this massive modern property on the edge of town, glass walls, stone facade, the kind of place he used to point at and say, "One day, babe," he never got it. But now I could. And not just to live in it, I wanted to turn that dream into my final chapter. So I made an offer. All cash. No mortgage. The real estate agent couldn't believe it. "Are you sure this is the one you want?" she asked. I just smiled. "Oh, I'm sure." I signed the papers the next day. I didn't move in. I staged it. I held an open house. I made sure the invitation somehow made it to Mia's inbox. When she walked in, eyes wide, heels clicking across the marble floor, I greeted her with a glass of champagne. "Welcome," I said with a smile. "Make yourself at home." She had no idea I was the owner, and I didn't tell her. I didn't need to. The open house ended quietly. Mia drifted from room to room, unaware she was walking through the house her husband once called his someday dream. I stood by the grand window overlooking the yard, sipping my champagne as if I was just another guest. She didn't recognize me, or maybe she did and didn't want to believe it. Either way, I let her linger in the illusion. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about showing myself that I'd become someone who no longer needed validation, especially not from people who once threw me away like I was nothing. After she left, I closed the doors behind her and walked through every room of that house. I touched the polished counters, ran my fingers over the stair railings, and let the silence wrap around me. This wasn't just a property. It was proof. Proof that I didn't crumble when Derek left. Proof that I had rebuilt my identity from the ashes of someone else's betrayal. Every wall in that house stood because I refused to fall. That night, I sat on the back patio, watching the sun go down over the trees, and thought about how far I had come. From begging the bank for loan extensions to owning the kind of home people drove by slowly just to stare at. The irony was sharp, but the peace I felt was sharper. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, not even to myself. The empire I built was no longer about what Derek did to me. It was about who I became after he left. I posted a photo the next morning on my business page, just the view from the house with a short caption. "Sometimes the best revenge is success lived quietly." It went viral within hours. People reached out, clients, old friends, even strangers, telling me how inspired they were. And somewhere in the chaos of that buzz, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I had already won. Not because I hurt him, but because I healed. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. It was Derek. His voice was shaky, laced with an unfamiliar humility. He told me he had seen the open house photos online and he knew it was me, knew that the house was the one he always wanted. He didn't apologize, not really. Instead, he asked how I had done it, how I'd gone from nothing to this. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I wanted to hang up, but instead I took a breath and said, "By doing the one thing you never believed I could, I bet on myself." He was quiet after that. I could feel the weight of his silence, the realization settling in. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his guilt. And I certainly didn't need his validation. That call wasn't closure, it was confirmation that I had already closed that chapter long ago. After the call, I sat down and wrote a post for my followers. I didn't name names, but I shared my story. I told them about losing everything, about being blindsided, about rebuilding when no one thought I could. I spoke from the scars, not the wounds. And the response was overwhelming. Messages from women all over the world who had felt the same kind of betrayal, who had been left behind, overlooked, discarded. And suddenly, my story wasn't just mine anymore, it was theirs too. That realization shifted something in me. I started hosting workshops for women who were trying to start over. I mentored, shared resources, opened doors that were once slammed in my face. My pain became purpose. My story became a map. And every time someone told me I inspired them to take the first step toward rebuilding, I knew. I hadn't just survived Derek, I had outgrown the world he tried to confine me to. The success of my workshop snowballed faster than I could have imagined. Within 6 months, I had launched an online platform that offered affordable coaching, financial literacy programs, and emotional healing sessions for women starting over after betrayal. The demand was overwhelming in the best way. Each day brought more emails, more stories, more women who were finally finding their footing again. I was no longer just healing, I was helping others do the same. And in the process, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. One day, as I was finalizing a licensing deal with a publishing company for my memoir, I got an invitation to speak at a national women's conference. I was stunned. This was the same stage that had once felt unreachable when I was folding laundry in a house I wasn't allowed to call my own. I stood on that stage weeks later, looked out at a sea of women, and told the truth. I thought my life ended when he walked away, but it had only just begun. The applause didn't just echo in the room. It echoed in my soul. It was the sound of reclaiming my voice. The best part, I had built all of this on my own terms. No one could take it from me. Not Derek, not the world that once dismissed me. I had become the woman I used to dream about when I cried myself to sleep. And now I was living that dream, not in spite of the pain I endured, but because I rose through it. Every time I shared my story, it became less about revenge and more about redemption. But the universe wasn't done yet. I was invited to participate in a local TV segment on successful women entrepreneurs. The crew came to my office to film. As they captured shots of the books, the photos, the hundreds of thank you notes from women I had helped, I stood by the window and looked across the street. There it was, the house Derek once fantasized about. My house now. The open house sign still sat out front, not because I wanted to sell it, but because I wanted him and the world to see that I had arrived. A few days after the TV segment aired, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. Then came the message: Derek. His voice was calm, too calm, asking if we could talk. I stared at the phone like it had just betrayed me. After all these years, he wanted to talk now? Not when I was desperate and abandoned, not when I was scraping coins to feed myself, but now? Now that I had something he couldn't ignore. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Silence was my power now, not his. A week later, I was at one of my community events when I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but no, it was real. Derek stood near the back, arms crossed, looking like a man who had seen a ghost. His wife, the same woman he left me for, stood beside him awkwardly. I carried on with my speech, letting my confidence speak louder than my past. I didn't acknowledge him, didn't offer a glance. I just poured my heart into the women who actually mattered, the ones rebuilding themselves like I had. When the event ended, he approached. He had aged. His confidence was hollow now, his voice slower, as if weighed down by years of regret. He told me he had watched my rise, that he was proud of me. I nearly laughed. Proud? Of the woman he discarded like a worn-out shoe? He stammered, trying to explain how things hadn't worked out like he thought, how his marriage was falling apart, how he'd made mistakes. I just smiled and said, "Thank you for leaving. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." He stood there stunned as I walked away. No anger, no revenge, just peace. I didn't need to tear him down to win. I had already won by becoming everything he thought I couldn't be. That night, as I sat in the kitchen of my dream home, surrounded by light and laughter from friends who had become family, I realized something powerful. My story wasn't about what he took from me, it was about what I reclaimed for myself. Weeks passed, and Derek didn't reach out again. Maybe he realized I truly didn't care anymore, or maybe he saw what the world now saw, a woman reborn from the ashes of betrayal. I was invited to speak at women's leadership conferences, featured in local magazines, even nominated for a small business award. But the recognition wasn't what fulfilled me. It was the quiet moments. The mornings where I woke up and felt safe, the days I signed paychecks for women I once stood beside in job lines, the nights I sat under my porch light with a cup of tea, knowing I had built all of this with nothing but grit, purpose, and a heart that refused to stay broken. One evening, I hosted a charity auction at the very venue Derek and I once visited for anniversaries. That place used to hold pain for me, memories of the life I thought I'd lived, the promises he broke. But standing there in front of hundreds of supporters, I felt none of that weight anymore. Just lightness, peace, joy. The event raised over $300,000 for single mothers starting over, just like I had once done. That night, one woman came up to me in tears saying, "Because of you, I didn't give up." And that moment, that meant more than all the money, all the success, all the headlines combined. I had become the woman I once prayed to become, the woman I didn't know was still inside me when I was crying on a kitchen floor, watching my world fall apart. I didn't just rebuild, I rewrote the entire story, and the ending was mine to write. The day I knew I had truly healed wasn't when I hit a financial milestone, or when another magazine featured my business, or even when I finally paid off the last of the debt Derek had left behind. It was when I drove past our old house, the one he fought to keep in the divorce like it was some trophy. It looked smaller now, dimmer. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I parked across the street and watched for a moment. A woman stood on the porch yelling into her phone. It was his new wife. I recognized her from the social media posts he used to flaunt. Her smile wasn't there anymore. The shine was gone. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel rage. I just felt distance. Like I had left all that behind on a road I'd long outgrown. Later that week, I hosted an open house, not for sale, but for celebration. My team had grown to over 50 employees. We were expanding into international markets, and the newest office, located right across from a firm Derek used to dream of working with. I invited former clients, investors, and women who'd reached out to me over the years. The buzz was electric. People asked me how I did it, how I went from heartbroken and homeless to powerful and unshaken. I smiled and told him the truth. You don't wait for a rescue, you become your own. Before the night ended, I took a quiet moment on the balcony. City lights blinked around me, and I felt every heartbeat of the life I'd built. Clara, once left with nothing, once told she wasn't enough, was now a name people respected, a force her ex could never control again. And if he watched from afar, if he regretted the day he walked away, that wasn't my burden anymore. To anyone listening who's ever felt discarded, underestimated, or broken, you are not done. Your story is still being written. And sometimes the chapter that breaks you is the same one that rebuilds you into someone unshakable. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who might need to hear this today. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.